What is up, everyone? Before we get into today's video, please make sure to like, subscribe, and always comment down below. It really helps out the video. So today, we're going to be taking a look at the state of Pennsylvania. A couple months ago, I did a video about what it's like to live in New Jersey. I talked about the different regions in the state, the cities, the history, you get it. Today, we're going to do the exact same thing, but with the state of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a very important state in America. It's one of the most historic states in America, from the Battle of Gettysburg to Philadelphia, to the state's manufacturing history. There is a lot to learn about Pennsylvania. So hopefully by the end of this video, you'll know a little bit more about the Keystone State. So let's get into this. So this is a pretty easy to understand map of the state of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is located in the northeastern part of the U.S. It is the 5th most populated state in America, and the population is declining. It is the 32nd largest state by size in the U.S. and was the 2nd state admitted in the Union. There are several different parts of Pennsylvania. There's Western Pennsylvania, Central Pennsylvania, and Eastern Pennsylvania. But there's also North Central, South Central, Southeast, Northeast, Northwest, Southwest. At least that's the way some people look at it. That's a little more complicated, so I'm just going to go West, Central, and Eastern Pennsylvania for this video. So first we need to define the different parts of Pennsylvania. Let's start in the northwest corner of the state in the Erie, Great Lakes area. While most would say that Pennsylvania is a northeastern state, you could say that this part of the state is more like the Midwest. The largest city in northwest Pennsylvania is the city of Erie, which has a population of 94,000 and is declining. Years ago, Erie used to be a very rough place, a former blue-collar town, and it was just barely hanging on, but things have improved here, and it's gotten a little bit nicer, yet still, they can't keep people around in Erie. Obviously, Erie, Pennsylvania gets its name from Lake Erie, and many people don't think of Pennsylvania as being on the Great Lakes, but a small part of the state is. As you can imagine, this part of the state gets a lot of lake-effect snow. Just outside of Erie is even a lighthouse. It's called the Presque Isle Lighthouse, and I believe it's the only lighthouse in the state of Pennsylvania. There's even a small coastline in Pennsylvania, but as you can imagine, the beaches here aren't very great. Overall, I think Erie is kind of a cool place. There's not really much here, and it's kind of boring, so I wouldn't recommend you go out of your way to go to Erie, but if you're in the area, why not give Erie a try? Another city in western Pennsylvania is Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is the 2nd largest city in the state of Pennsylvania and has a population of 300,000 and declining. Pittsburgh is nicknamed Steel City due to its steel production. Most of those jobs have went away, however. So as you can imagine, Pittsburgh is right in the middle of the Rust Belt region. Pittsburgh is also where 3 very important rivers to the region meet up: the Allegheny River, the Ohio River, and the Monongahela River. Pittsburgh has a really pretty downtown, but it's pretty small and it's not really super interesting. However, for about a decade ago or so, Pittsburgh has really made a comeback. The most trendy neighborhoods in the city are the Strip District and Shady Side, both having bars, cafes, a popular nightlife scene, and are pretty trendy. Honestly, more activity is happening in these neighborhoods than downtown. Of course, Pittsburgh is also known for its large number of bridges. There are a whopping 446 bridges in the city of Pittsburgh, one of the highest numbers in the nation. Also, the colors black and yellow are the iconic Pittsburgh city colors. The Pittsburgh Steelers, the football team, the Penguins, the hockey team, and the Pirates, the baseball team, all have black and yellow in their logos. Even the famous rapper Wiz Khalifa, who's from Pittsburgh, made a very famous song called Black and Yellow. I think Pittsburgh is a very cool city. It's somewhat up and coming and is certainly improving. A pretty interesting town in western Pennsylvania is Johnstown. Johnstown, Pennsylvania is famously known for its flood of 1889. A dam in the city of Johnstown erupted after several days of heavy rainfall. This was one of the most devastating floods in American history and caused $17 million in damage, and that was in 1889, which is roughly $550 million in today's money. And another major flood hit Johnstown in 1977. This city is very susceptible to flooding, clearly. Today, Johnstown is one of the most depressing and poor places you could live in Pennsylvania. It's very run down, and there's very little life here. Western Pennsylvania is also home to the small town of Punxsutawney, which is home to Punxsutawney Phil. the groundhog that predicts whether we have several weeks of winter or we get an early spring. However, I don't think Punxsutawney Phil is very good at predicting the weather, considering that he's only been accurate 39% of the time. Western Pennsylvania is also home to Mount Davis, the highest point in the state of Pennsylvania. Despite Pennsylvania being a very mountainous and hilly state, the highest point is only 3,213 feet, which is lower than Colorado's lowest point. Not too far away is Flight 93 National Memorial. On the morning of 9/11, 2001, one of the planes that was hijacked during the 9/11 terrorist attack crashed in a field right here in western Pennsylvania. Other than the couple notable places I mentioned, most of western Pennsylvania is open country. Many farms, mountains, forests, you get the point. Now let's move on to central Pennsylvania. Now, if you thought western Pennsylvania was boring, central Pennsylvania is even more boring. The first place in central Pennsylvania I'd like to mention is Altoona. Altoona has a population of 45,000 and is one of the most hilly and mountainous parts of the state. Altoona is one of the most historic cities in America when it comes to the railroad. In fact, Pennsylvania as a whole has a very important role in railroads, from the Erie Railroad to the Pennsylvania Railroad. They have a very big railroad museum in Altoona, and I've been there, and it's one of the coolest museums I have ever been to. If you're a rail fan, I would highly recommend you check out the Railroaders Museum in Altoona. Just outside of Altoona is Horseshoe Curve, which is a huge railroad curve that cuts right through a mountain, and it's a very, very important railroad for freight and for Amtrak alike. Also in central PA is the town of State College, which, as the name suggests, is one of the largest college towns in America. It's home to Penn State University, the largest school in the state of Pennsylvania. And one thing Penn State is known for is its football and its rival with Ohio State and Michigan. State College is also one of the best places you can live in Pennsylvania. Very different from the rest of central PA. Another place in central PA of note is Williamsburg, which is nicknamed the lumber capital of the world. Not so much today, as most lumber jobs in America are in Maine, but still a pretty significant history here. Of course, we can't talk about central PA without talking about Gettysburg, one of the most historic places in America. The Battle of Gettysburg was one of the longest, most brutal battles in American history, a fight between the Union and the Confederacy. And today, there is plenty of historic sites you can check out in Gettysburg, and I think is one of the coolest small towns in Pennsylvania. Now, of course, Pennsylvania is known for its large Amish population, most of which live in southern or central PA. While most of them live in Lancaster, which is a little bit further east, there's still a very large Amish population in central PA. It's not uncommon to drive down a country road and see an Amish buggy with a horse. But you may be surprised to find out that Indiana and Ohio have larger Amish populations than Pennsylvania. An interesting part of the central PA geography are the valleys. So if you take a look at this satellite picture, you'll see that the trees are where the mountains are, and where there's fields are the valleys. As you can imagine, this is what a lot of central PA looks like. As I said before, central PA is the most rural part of the state, and especially in the northern part of Pennsylvania. Generally, anything north of Interstate 80 in central PA is an area called the Pennsylvania Wilds, where it's pretty much just forest and isolation. Some would even call this wilderness. Let's move on to eastern Pennsylvania. This is where all the action is, people. Of course, we have to talk about Philly. Philadelphia is the largest city in Pennsylvania and is the sixth largest city in the country, with a population of 1.6 million people. Philadelphia is one of the most historic cities in America. The Declaration of Independence was written in Philadelphia. The Liberty Bell was rung in Philadelphia. The American flag was designed in Philadelphia. People in Philadelphia don't refer to the downtown area as downtown. They call it Center City. Old City is where most of the historic stuff is, on the east side of Center City. On the outskirts of Center City is South Street, which is the main nightlife area of Philadelphia. It's home to many bars, restaurants, stores, and places to eat. It can get pretty rowdy here. South Philly is also a pretty well-known part of the city, home to the two most famous cheesesteak spots in Philly, Pat's and Geno's, but most people in Philly will tell you that they're overrated and you should go anywhere but Pat's and Geno's, which I agree with. They're not that good. Also in Philadelphia is Fairmount Park, which is over 3 times the size of Central Park. The most gentrified neighborhood in Philadelphia is Fishtown, a neighborhood in North Philly, which used to be a rough place but is really becoming trendy and making a comeback. You may be surprised, but Philly has the largest outdoor art scene in America. There are murals all over Philadelphia. It's very impressive. While there's plenty of good things in Philadelphia, sadly, there are still some horrible parts of the city, particularly in North Philly. Areas like Kensington are so eye-opening. They're some of the worst places in the country. And of course, there are Eagles fans, probably the most violent, aggressive sports fans in the country, okay? They will get violent, they will fight you. They are crazy. In my opinion, Philly is one of the greatest cities in the country. It's pretty walkable, extremely historic, and the people there are very passionate. Eastern Pennsylvania is also home to Harrisburg, the state capital, which is very boring, so I'm not going to waste my time talking about it. Nearby is York, which is where they make York peppermint patties. Sadly, this city is very rough around the edges. Another place of note in this area is Hershey Park, one of the coolest amusement parks in the nation. Also in eastern Pennsylvania is Reading, which is a pretty blighted and poverty-stricken city with a high crime rate. Also, a couple months ago, a chocolate factory exploded in Reading. I'm not kidding. Nearby is the city of Pottsville, which is home to Yingling Beer, which is actually the first beer in America, the first brewery, so that's really cool. As you head further north in eastern PA, you have the Lehigh Valley region, which is home to the cities of Allentown, Bethlehem, and Easton. Allentown is the largest city in the Lehigh Valley and is generally pretty boring and kind of rough around the edges. Easton is the smallest city in the Lehigh Valley region and is pretty boring, but it's still pretty quaint and kind of a decent place to live. But my favorite of the Lehigh Valley cities would have to go to Bethlehem. Bethlehem has a really nice historic downtown, pretty decent neighborhoods, and is home to the Steel Stacks, which is an abandoned steel mill, which has been turned into a casino area and a park, an historic district, so you can walk around and actually go inside the steel plant, which I think is really cool. The last metro area I'm going to talk about in eastern Pennsylvania would be the Scranton-Wilkes-Barre area. Scranton isn't really all that interesting, although they do have a big railroad industry if you're into that. Wilkes-Barre is the other city in this region, and it's a little bit nicer than Scranton, but it's still pretty rough around the edges, although they do have some really nice neighborhoods, and it's a bit more interesting than Scranton. Now let's talk about Pennsylvania's coal country region. Hazleton is the largest city in this region, and it only has 40,000 people. Did you know that Hazleton has the highest point of any city in Pennsylvania? Hazleton is 8,000 feet above sea level, which doesn't seem like a lot, but compared to other Pennsylvania cities, it's really high. Today, Hazleton is a popular destination for Hispanic immigrants. In fact, Hazleton is 67% Hispanic, one of the highest numbers in Pennsylvania. However, the city has had racial tensions, and a lot of the locals in the area don't like the large influx of Hispanic immigrants. In this region of Pennsylvania is Centralia, which is a ghost town, literally. In 1962, an underground coal fire started in Centralia, and the fire progressively got worse over time. Right now, there's only about 11 people that live in the town, but there's eminent domain, so once these people die, their homes will be torn down. Most people left by the 80s and 90s, and today there are absolutely no homes other than the homes that the 11 people live in. Unfortunately, most of the former coal mining towns in eastern Pennsylvania are crumbling. Shamokin is probably the worst town of all of them. The most common type of coal that was mined here was anthracite coal. In fact, anthracite coal is one of the purest type of coals in the world. In fact, 96% of all the anthracite in the world comes from northeastern Pennsylvania. The last part of the state I'll be talking about is the Poconos region. The Pocono region is probably the prettiest part of Pennsylvania. There are plenty of forests, lakes, creeks, rivers, places to hike, places to ski, mountain views, places where you can stay like hotels and Airbnbs. A lot of people come up here, especially for weekends in the summer. It's really a beautiful place and is actually a pretty small in area, but it's really one of the most beautiful parts of the state. So we talked about the regions, the cities, and stuff like that, but what else is Pennsylvania known for? Well, Pennsylvania is known for hunting. In fact, Pennsylvania has the most hunters in America per capita. You can hunt all types of things in Pennsylvania: turkeys, deer, raccoons, squirrels, elks, you get it. Pennsylvania is a pretty important state for agriculture, in particular the dairy industry. There are plenty of dairy farms in Pennsylvania. Of course, there's also the Wawa Sheetz rivalry. Pennsylvania is known for their really good convenience stores. The two most popular ones are Wawa and Sheetz. Wawa is more popular in the Philly area in eastern Pennsylvania, while Sheetz is more dominant in central and western Pennsylvania. Both of them have made-to-order food, fresh coffee, clean bathrooms, and friendly employees. Other popular gas stations in the area include Rutter's and Turkey Hill, but both of these gas stations cannot compare to the sheer dominance of Wawa and Sheetz. So I hope you guys learned something about Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a beautiful state, from the mountains to the greenery, the history, Wawa and Sheetz. Pennsylvania is a very interesting state. It's one of our biggest states, and it's one of our most historic. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys understand the state of Pennsylvania a little bit better now. I think it's a pretty underrated state, so I definitely recommend that you visit. That's going to be it for today's video. Make sure to like, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.